Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
Are the Raiders ready for a rebound? I know who the Jets should pursue at quarterback this offseason and what people are still getting wrong about Sam Darnold's Super Bowl win. All that and more on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey, welcome in, off and running. It is a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports, episode number 77 of the podcast. Lots to discuss, plenty to talk about on this edition of the pod. More football to discuss. There is no offseason in the NFL. Didn't you know that? I know who the Jets should be pursuing this offseason to fix the quarterback issues surrounding the team heading into 2026. I'll tell you about that. What people are still getting wrong about Sam Darnold's success with the Seahawks, we'll discuss that. Also, are the Raiders actually ready for a turnaround? And, now that the coaching carousel is done spinning, it seems like the Raiders are in a really good spot to finally become at least a functional NFL team once again. So I'll lay out the case for that coming up. But before we get into any of that, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, whatever platform you're taking the podcast in on. Like it, rate it, share it, whatever you got to do. Hit a couple of buttons. It certainly helps out. But most importantly, hit that subscribe button because, look, it only takes a second. And most importantly, it's absolutely free. All right, let's get into the Sam Darnold stuff first because there's more fallout from the Seahawks Super Bowl win. Congratulations to the Seahawks. Congratulations to Sam Darnold. But, the fallout of Darnold resurrecting his career from this draft bust, what he looked like for the first few years, to now Super Bowl leading quarterback, champion type player, there's been this narrative that's popped up that this just shows that if the Jets just needed to give him more time, they weren't patient enough with him. If the fans were more patient, if the team was more patient, this would not have. They could have built around Sam. And look, I get it. Eventually, you got rid of Sam and you brought in Zach Wilson, who clearly was not as good as Sam. I get that. There's no debate there. But what Sam became when he went first with the Vikings and then this year with the Seahawks only came about because he left the Jets. He would not have done this for them. Sam would not have saved the Jets. That's the wrong message that you're getting here. He needed to get out of here. The best thing that Joe Douglas ever did for Sam Darnold was to trade him out of New York because it was not going to work here. And to think that Sam would have done this here is to dismiss what he learned in a year in sitting in San Francisco or playing for one season under Kevin O'Connell or moving on and playing under Clint Kubiak with good functioning NFL teams. The Jets were the problem with Sam back then. And look, the Jets are still kind of the problem. So I see that you can look at Sam's success and think, well, I want to wipe out the last 5 years. And if Sam were still here, it would have all worked out. No, it wouldn't have. This would not have taken place with the Jets. So I think that that's the wrong message that if you're taking that away, I always knew Sam was going to turn it around. No, you didn't. And he would not have turned it around, certainly if he stuck with the Jets. All right, that's enough about quarterbacks past with the Jets. Let's move on to the guy that the Jets should be pursuing this offseason. And the number one goal, let's be clear, of this offseason, the Jets had to find someone who can play quarterback at a fairly reasonable level. I'm not saying the long-term solution. I'm just talking about the right now because it's crisis time if you're the New York Jets. They need to get somebody who can come in here day one and play the position functionally. And that's going to be, it would sound like, that's not that hard to do. No, that's going to be a problem. It's not going to be easy this offseason. The draft, it seems like, in terms of ready-made prospects who come in day one and can expect to be the starter, it's a one-quarterback draft, and the Jets have pick number 2, and Fernando Mendoza is going to the Raiders. There's no good free agents. There's very rarely any good free agents for quarterbacks. And kind of given the stench around the Jets right now, I think the only kind of guys you can attract through free agency are either one, guy who has no options and is just trying to hang on to his career. That's not a great situation for the Jets. Or the guy that you're going to wildly overpay who's also not that good. You're paying him over what he's actually worth, so that's not a good situation. And some of the names that have been floated, Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is going to be 38 next year. He kind of looks washed. Like, he had plenty of talent down in Atlanta and couldn't make it work. How much do you think realistically he can come in here and play the entire season? Because if you were talking about drafting a guy in the second round or letting a guy get drafted and sit for a while, okay, fine. Let Kirk Cousins go out there 5-6 weeks and then you transition. But it doesn't look like there's that guy in this year's draft. There's no rookie that it looks like is going to be able to come in here and kind of fix the Jets' problems, especially when the further down the draft you look. If you're saying Mendoza's the only guy that you like in round 1, okay, round 2, round 3. The deeper you go in the draft, the chances are that guy is going to be more of a project. And if Aaron Glenn wants to see year 3, I don't think you can realistically draft a guy on day 3 of the draft and expect that that guy is going to be a contributor in year 1. Another name that I've heard floated has been Deshaun Watson. I mean, come on. Let me make this clear. If Aaron Glenn brings in Deshaun Watson this offseason to be the quarterback, I never want to hear the word culture another day in my life. The Browns are willing to take an $80 million cap hit to get rid of this guy. That kind of tells you everything you need to know. Also, it's a little bit of a fly in the ointment, the fact that the guy is allegedly a sexual monster, basically, not exactly a good thing for the culture, right? Never mind the fact the guy doesn't seem like he can play anymore. I get that he's only 30. He's injured. He stinks. The Browns want rid of him the worst way possible. No, that's not an answer. So look, here's the uncomfortable thing we have to put out there right away. There's no good option. There's no miracle coming in here to save you. So you have to, if you're the Jets, you have to balance two separate things. If you're Aaron Glenn, I get fans want to go 0-17, but if you're Aaron Glenn, you need to win some games this year. 3-14 is not going to cut it. Also, I don't think you want to force the quarterback if you don't love somebody in this 2026 draft. You would be better served waiting until 2027, where it seems like there's more high-end prospects. All right, so with that as the preface here, what's the move? Now, hear me out. You got to keep an open mind to this. The move the guy the Jets should be pursuing this offseason is Kyler Murray. Now, look, I can hear you already tuning. You said you weren't going to do that. We have to go into this with an open mind. And I said, there are 0 great options. So this is like laundry day, and you're looking for the least dirty shirt. Kyler Murray is the least dirty shirt. So let me lay out the case for you. Let me at least make the pitch before you turn off the podcast and never listen again. First off, the dude is 28. Go look at what are available this offseason. It's all guys over the hill. This guy's still in his physical prime. He's not washed up. It would not be unrealistic for Kyler Murray to still be an NFL quarterback in 5 years, never mind just next season. Second, his stock has never been lower. And I think that kind of matters. Now, are there knocks on him? Yes, there are. The big one is guy can't stay healthy. And in fairness, only played 5 games last season. So he was banged up. Now, there's some context there. He had a foot injury. It was a Liz Frank injury. Those take a long time to heal. And by the time he was ready to come back, the Cardinals were already out of it. I mean, they lost 9 games in a row at the end of the season. And they were basically soft tanking. So there was no reason to come bring him back and get him hurt again. So last year he was hurt. That lines up. But in 2024, which is not exactly ancient history, he played all 17 games and played pretty well. He completed almost, I think, 70% of his passes, 3,800 yards, 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, had a quarterback rating of 93. That's not a guy who's washed. That's not a guy who had a fluky year. That's a good NFL quarterback, and by Jet standards in history, is a really good quarterback. And given where they are right now, you would die to have something like that. And when you project his stats over 17 games, if healthy, which again is a big if, this is a guy who throws for 4,000 yards a year, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, rushes for over 600 yards, completes about 67% of his passes. That is dynamic. That's someone that can actually play the position. That's a guy other teams actually have to account for. And we know this already. So, and I think more importantly, what Murray does is it allows you to not force the draft. He could be your quarterback for all of 2026 and could be your quarterback going into 2027 if healthy. That buys you time. That's the thing you need right now. That allows you to use your draft capital this year, not to force a quarterback, to build out the rest of the team, add another receiver, add things on defense. And then in 2027, when the quarterback class is a bit better, you can then use your draft capital then. And you know what? If Murray is able to have a bounce back season, which is pretty much tied to health, that would allow him to be the starter going into 2027. And then you can have the rookie sit behind him for a little while and not force that rookie, not throw him to the wolves in week one. So another knock on him is his contract is terrible. It's actually not as bad as it sounds. Murray's entering year 3 of a 5-year deal for $230.5 million. But, and that sounds nuts, but the cap is going up crazy, right? The 2026 salary cap is rising far greater than anybody expected it. So swallowing that contract now is not as bad as it was a couple of years ago. And here's the key part. If Murray's traded as is, a lot of league insiders think that you could get him for a day 3 pick, basically a 4th-round pick. For a team like the Jets, with cap space, so the contract's not an issue because you got cap space, you can't spend all the money, and you have a level of desperation, you get to keep your premium draft capital, buy low on a guy who probably is, wherever he goes, he's going to be trying to save his NFL career. Now, Arizona might want to eat some of that money to get better draft pick. That's the dance of negotiation. You can figure out that later. But we're not talking about a guy where you're going to have to trade a 1st-round pick or multiple 1st-round picks. And he's a distressed asset at quarterback, a guy who can actually play the position when healthy. Those kind of guys are rare. Also, the final year of his contract, 2028, is a team option. So there's a 0 dead cap hit there. So if it doesn't work, it's not like it's not like the Deshaun Watson deal with the Browns. You're not handcuffed to this guy forever. Now, is there risk? Of course. The fact that he's even available and for so little, there's obviously risk. The health is a concern. Maturity has been a concern. I don't know what Call of Duty games are coming out in 2026. But again, this guy can play at a level, and right now, not 3 years ago, play at that level. The fact that he's available, yeah, there's going to be issues. But I would think playing behind an improved Jets offensive line would certainly help his durability. And if he's healthy, he can play. We have seen him play at a high level. And again, is he perfect? No, you're not going to get perfect this offseason. You're trying to find viable. You're trying to find somebody who can play. You're not looking for Mr. Right. You're looking for Mr. Right now. You got to find somebody who can come in. He comes in here and gives you competence. He gives you upside. He gives you flexibility. And he gives Aaron Glenn a real chance to see year 3 without mortgaging the future on a quarterback that's a project and probably a quarterback you're not going to love. Again, there are no great options. I'm not trying to tell you Kyler Murray is a great option, but he's the best option. And the goal should be for the Jets and Aaron Glenn, survive and advance. Survive 2026, advance to 2027. And if that's the goal, Kyler Murray is the best move available for the New York Jets. All right, one quick note on the Winter Olympics, because people always ask me as a diehard sports fan, are you watching the Winter Olympics? Are you excited about the Winter Olympics? Hey, did you see what happened at the Winter Olympics? And my answer is always the same. Every 4 years, the answer is always no. No, I did not watch the Winter Olympics. I'm not planning on watching the Winter Olympics. And it's a very simple why. As a sports fan, if you're a diehard sports fan, your calendar is already booked, right? You're not looking, if anything, you're trying to pare down the amount of sports you watch as you get old. You're not sitting around in mid-February saying, you know what, I need more sports to emotionally invest in. You've got your dance card is booked. You've already got your teams and the ones that you've poured in months to, years to, right? Year in and year out. The entire season, the offseason, spring training into baseball, the draft talk in the NFL, the NBA, free agency, training camp. Like, you care because of the amount of time that you invest in the teams that you love. That's kind of the whole point of fandom. The investment, the connection, the bond that you have with those teams, and in some cases, those players. So how am I supposed to exactly be emotionally locked in with some skier I've never heard of, competing in a sport I don't ever really watch. Maybe I watched it 4 years ago. I don't remember. And also, it happens in like 2.5 minutes. Like, how much am I supposed to be invested in? How does that make any sense? The Olympics are sports for people who are not sports fans because they buy into all the emotional aspects of it. So look, for me, I'll flip it on. It'll be background noise, but I don't care about downhill skiing. I don't care about figure skating. I don't like sports that are judged in the first place. To me, it's like wine tasting at that point. Like, it's just everybody's opinion and it's kind of subjective to a point. So no, that's not what I'm looking for. I've got my dance card booked. You know, at least with the Summer Olympics, I feel like it's not a manufactured event just to have something else to go to. Summer Olympics, right? It's people running, it's people throwing things, it's people jumping. That's legitimate. It's not people putting on skis and shooting a gun and all this type of nonsense. The Summer Olympics is something pure about that. The Winter Olympics, it always kind of feels like for people that are into it, it's like I've walked into a sports bar in another country and I don't speak the language. So look, have I checked in? Nah, I'm not really checked in. I'm certainly not locked in. I always say that my favorite event of the Winter Olympics is always the same. It's the closing ceremonies. I love it when it's over. And that's going to be the same case this year because it means that we can get back to the sports that we really care about. And if you're a diehard sports fan, chances are the Winter Olympics are not them. Maybe the hockey to some fans, because hockey, I mean, those people are delusional. I mean, they're nuts about the hockey. They can't get enough hockey. But the Winter Olympics, no, it's not for me. And it's not generally for the diehard sports fan either. It's for people who don't like sports, but who want to watch sports. That's a weird cross-section.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
Okay, we're on to the NFL offseason. And of course, if you're a football fan, you know there is no offseason. We've got basically a month until NFL free agency hits. We've got about 70 days until the NFL draft. And this is a time NFL fans love the offseason because there's always something going on. The draft talk will obviously capture a lot of attention. And when you're a fan of a bad team, this is your Super Bowl. This is the time where you can delude yourself into thinking this offseason is going to be different. The regular season, that's brutal to get through. And this year, a lot of the teams at the top of the draft are generally at the top of the draft year in and year out, right? The Jets are certainly one. The Raiders are certainly one. The Browns are certainly one. Even teams like the Cardinals or the Giants, they've been, certainly the Giants have been there a bunch over the last decade. But one of those teams, I think, is really set up well to finally get back onto the road of respectability. And they're one of the old-time premier franchises. And it would be the Raiders. Since the Raiders moved to Vegas, really even before then, but since then, that move to Vegas, they've been bad. They have been a complete dumpster fire. Really, since Mark Davis took over back in 2011, they've been terrible. They've had 2 winning seasons in that entire time. They've had no playoff wins in that time. They've had, I think, 7 head coaches, 9 if you include the interims along with that. They've had 5 or 6 GMs in that span. I think that they're still paying, 3 coaches and 3 GMs. So guys that are not even with the organization anymore are still drawing a paycheck, which is great for those former coaches and former GMs. Not exactly a sign that your organization is well run when you're still paying people well after they've been let go. So this offseason, it's not about a reset for the Raiders. It's almost like an exorcism, right? Because they did not get here with one move or in one season. And they're not going to, all of a sudden become contenders next year. I'm not saying that, but for the first time in a really long time, there's a real argument to be made that this is the offseason. If they're ever going to be good in the next decade, this is the offseason where it's got to start because they have all the tools necessary for a real reset, a foundational reset. But before we get into where they're going, let's talk about where they've been, right? So since 2020 is when they moved to Vegas. They move into that brand new stadium, and they were set up really well back in 2020. They had 2 number 1 picks. They had 5 picks in the top 100. So that's real draft capital. And a chance to build the organization right? Foundational pieces come through the draft. And instead, there's no other way to say it. The Raiders just kind of sabotaged themselves. At 12, they took Henry Ruggs. We know what happened there. At 19, they took Damon Arnett, who, if you've never heard Damon Arnett, don't worry, it doesn't matter because he was a bust. And here's the part that really hurts. Even saying 12 and 19, the draft, there was real talent available in that draft. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Tristan Wirfs, Jordan Love was in that draft. So those are franchise-altering players. And instead, the Raiders took all that draft capital and essentially flushed it down the toilet. They had nothing really long-term to pull from that draft despite all those draft picks. And then in 2021, they just kind of compounded the problem. They needed help along the offensive line. Christian Darrisaw is sitting there for them at 17. They take Alex Leatherwood. Raider fans know this all too well. Darrisaw becomes, a high-end tackle in Minnesota. And Leatherwood, even though a great name, Alex Leatherwood, that sounds like a football player. He played one season in Vegas, was out of the league by 2023. And in the NFL, the draft is essential. If you screw up the draft, there's no way to make up for that. And you only get so many draft picks a year. And those two drafts back-to-back, that is franchise crippling. And that's before everything, as bad as that was, things from that point only got worse. Because then in 2021, you get the whole John Gruden situation. Gruden was brought in, 10-year contract, $100 million. He was going to be the face of the turnaround. He was the last coach where they had some sustained success. And then the emails come out, racist language, anti-gay language, misogynist language, all the kind of languages you don't want. And he's forced to resign. So just like that, not that Gruden was doing a whole great job as it was, but at least that's somebody who that Mark Davis could look at that had some NFL success in his career. So he said that's where it really kind of fell apart. So then they turned to Rich Bisaccia, who actually did a really good job. I think it went 7-5 down the stretch, got the team in the playoffs, keeps the locker room together. And then after the season, they decide, you know what, we're not going to keep Rich Bisaccia, as good a job as he does. We're going to look for that next new whiz kid mind, and they go out and they hire Josh McDaniels. They also brought in Dave Ziegler as their GM, and that's, like a sign of a bad organization. You don't just make one mistake, you compound those mistakes with more mistakes. Because when they go to the playoffs in 2021, as fluky as it was getting in on the final day, they allowed themselves to think, that created the illusion that they were closer than what they were. So what do? They go out, rather than rebuild, they reload. They go out and they make the trade for Davante Adams, give up a first-round pick, I think a second-round pick as well, at a time where the Raiders really should have been looking at, building more foundational pieces. And look, Davante Adams was a great receiver at the time, but timing matters on this, right? Roster construction matters. And I know he wanted to play with Derek Carr, his college teammate and all that type of stuff, but that wore off rather quickly. 2 seasons in, he's frustrated with everything that's going on with the Raiders. He wants out. And at that point, the Raiders already traded the draft picks. You're not getting draft picks back for him now. And at the same time, McDaniels, he got fed up with Derek Carr as his quarterback. So Carr first got benched. Then he gets released. This came after he had gotten a pretty big contract extension. And because of that contract, he's not able to get any compensation back for him, and was moving on from Carr not necessarily. I mean, he was a solid quarterback, but he was nothing spectacular. He had one really good season, and that was it. But the problem was the Raiders had no replacement plan. So they were kind of hoping that Tom Brady would come and save them from themselves. That didn't happen at that time. He stayed retired. They tried to trade up in the quarterback, the draft. The top 2 guys were Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. That was too expensive. So then they start looking for plan C, which was Jimmy Garoppolo. They signed him to a contract for $70 million. Needless to say, that did not work out. Then they move, they fire McDaniels. They hand Antonio Pierce the job. I think that was mid-2023. He wins some games late down the stretch of that season, which is counterproductive because now they can't draft the quarterbacks of Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and Drake May and all those guys, Bo Nix. So they were in quarterback purgatory. And then this past offseason, when they had 4 wins last year, they decided to go out and make a trade for Geno Smith and bring in Pete Carroll. One disaster after another. So again, they have not found themselves in this position. But the good news is they are now as bad as it can be, right? You have the number 1 pick in the draft. It can't get any worse than that. And if you're going to fail all the way, man. Rock bottom generally gives you a ladder. Staying mediocre, that's a shovel. You just, as you see with the Raiders, they just kept making things worse and worse and worse. And last year, this past season, it couldn't get worse. Their offensive line was absolutely brutal. They were 22nd in both run rate and pass rate. They averaged less than 75 yards on the ground per game. They were last in nearly every rushing metric. This after selecting Ashton Jeanty with the 6th pick in the draft. A mistake there, even though generational running back. It's amazing how there's these generational running backs every single draft. They allowed 55 sacks last year, and if you think that sounds high, yeah, it is high. It was the most in the league. So they had a whole bunch of problems. And as great as Ashton Jeanty might be, he had 2 games where he had over 100 yards rushing. He had 8 games where he had under 50 yards. So it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter who played quarterback, although Geno Smith was terrible. It didn't matter what plays were called. When you don't have an offensive line, you cannot do anything on offense. And the Raiders were proof positive of that. They had no offensive line, and I mean, look, they're also playing in a very competitive division. Even with the Chiefs having a down year, year in and year out, the Chiefs have been really good. This past year, the Broncos took a major step up. The Chargers were a playoff team as well. So, the last 5 years for the Vegas Raiders, this is not how you dreamed it up when the move was announced that they were heading to Vegas. They were going to be the team in Vegas and the cool, shiny stadium. This is not how you drew it up. But that is all prelude to this, because now this is not, when you have the first pick in the draft, you can't be in desperation mode anymore, right? Like, you can't delude yourself into thinking you're closer than you are. So they go out, and even though they're the last team to hire a coach, they get Clint Kubiak on a 5-year deal. And look, his success with Seattle 1 year, he's the hot offensive coordinator this year. And sometimes, a first-year head coach walking in the door to a dysfunctional organization, he doesn't really know what he's walking into. But he's walking into a situation that could not be any worse, and I think finally now has a cohesive plan on how to put this together, because, we kind of talked about how much Tom Brady was going to play a part in this, and last offseason, he tried to have a hand in the coach and all that type of stuff, and he was not able to get Ben Johnson, so that did not work out. This year, I think he really wanted Clint Kubiak. So it doesn't seem like this is just random decision-making anymore. It seems like for the first time in a while, and look, the owner there, he has not done a good job. You're always going to kind of question his decisions, but between Brady running things, head coach, they have a quarterback target, they've got a ton of draft capital, the number 1 pick in a draft, and a ton of financial flexibility as well. So let's get into it, because I think that the biggest thing for any organization, right, trying to figure out who the quarterback is going to be. And with the Raiders, lucky for them, they have the number 1 pick in a year where they're desperate for a quarterback, and it seems like it's a 1-quarterback draft. Fernando Mendoza comes in. He is a lock to be the first pick in the draft. And it's coming off an incredible year at Indiana this past year, national championship, 41 touchdown passes, the Heisman Trophy, all that type of stuff. And that production's great. I think that there's still some major questions about him as a pro. I know I have them. But the good thing is his production is not the reason why he fits. Kubiak's system kind of lines up perfectly for him. Kubiak's system is all about bootlegs and rhythm timing and defined reads, about structure. And if Mendoza, if he has one strength, it's about mental processing. That's what they say he is elite at. He diagnoses things very quickly, and he's very precise with the short and intermediate throws. He thrives when the offense is on schedule. Now, look, he's not Caleb Williams. He's not that natural arm talent. He's not going to play backyard football. You get a pass rush on him, his completion percentage is basically a coin flip. So you're going to have to work on that offensive line. But Kubiak's system is specifically designed to put him in a very good spot. Strong run game, heavy motion stuff, clear reads, defined throws. what people say is if you were building a quarterback in a lab for the type of system that Clint Kubiak runs, Fernando Mendoza would be that kind of guy. So, look, he's not walking into a great environment, and I'm sure there's going to be some rough moments for him at quarterback as a rookie, but he's walking into about as good a spot as you can get in terms of the coach. Secondly, Raiders are going to have over $100 million in cap space. I think it's the second most in the NFL, and you can always kind of fudge those numbers because the cap is so flexible. They have got 10 draft picks this year, and while the draft is not great, they could add to that because Max Crosby certainly wants out after everything that happened at the end of the season, so they could help their draft capital quite a bit. And I would suggest to them looking not to add capital this year, but for the 2027 draft, because that draft seems like the one that is loaded with talent, especially quarterback talent. Now, why would they care about quarterback talent if they're drafting Fernando Mendoza? Well, because there's going to be the Raiders are not going to they're not going to win 10 games next season. So if you have another high draft pick next year, and you've got a lot of draft capital already next year, and you can move down and stockpile play, I mean, that's how you start to really get out of the doldrums that you have been in a hopeless situation. You need more dart throws at the dartboard. So this is a team that, for the first time, they're not boxed in by any bad contracts. They're not a team scrambling to kind of fill things this offseason. They've got some real ammunition to at least put this on the right road for the first time in a long time. Now, look, they got to build an offensive line. Their defense is still a work in progress, but nobody's expecting them to win 10 games next year. And that's how rebuilds kind of happen, right? Like some realistic expectations. Quarterback on a rookie contract where you're not spending any money on that. Some cap flexibility, some draft assets, alignment from the front office and the ownership on down. And look, I'll say this about the team. They've done a horrible job at drafting in the past, and that's why they're in the position they're in. But they do have some pieces on offense. It's not like he's walking into Fernando Mendoza a bare cupboard. As I mentioned, Genti, he was a big-time running back in college. He's the real deal if you can get some blocking for him. Obviously, they have Brock Bowers as well, who's a premier receiving tight end, which is certainly a good thing to have. If you're a rookie quarterback, a young quarterback, a friendly weapon to be able to use there to kind of build your offense. So I think that at least there are some pieces here. Again, if they're ever going to be good, this is the offseason where they have to start to build things. Now, I'm not going to paint a picture that the Raiders are a playoff team. They still play in the AFC West. Chiefs are going to be back next year. They probably have a better season than this year. Denver is still really good. The Chargers were a playoff team this past season. If they draft Mendoza, he's going to be a rookie quarterback walking in. There's going to be some pains there. And building an offensive line, man, you can't do that in one offseason. Not as bad as the Raiders' offensive line has been. Maybe you get a piece here and there, but it's going to take some time. But the difference, I think, with the Raiders is it seems like they now have a real direction. And, with bad organizations, they're always kind of flipping from here to there. Now, it seems like they have a plan. Now, you can when you have the first pick, you can't fool yourself into thinking you're not terrible. They're clearly terrible. And for years, I think that owner has just kind of chased names. I think that's why he went with Gruden. I think a lot of bad owners don't really know football at all. You would think that that's crazy. It's $1 billion organization. How can they not know football? But they just chase a big name and they think that that's what's going to fix everything. So I think that the Raiders, you could say that Tom Brady's a big name and he's not the GM of the team, but they have some real pieces and some real ways. Of all the boxes that you need to check to be able to get out of the doldrums like the Raiders have been in, they have it. They have a rookie quarterback that they're going to be able to develop. They have a guy in their head coach who been able to work with quarterbacks in the past. They have a bunch of draft picks. They got a bunch of money to spend this offseason. If they can hit on, an offensive lineman here or there, they get some blocking for Genti, they could be an exciting team in a short period of time. And it's been a long time. The Raider fan, that's one of those old-time fan bases, back in the day where you used to maybe go to a sports bar to go look at the games. there would be sections of the sports bar where the fans would congregate, right? There would be a section of Viking fans. There would be a section of Dolphin fans. And there would be a section of Raider fans. They are one of the preeminent organizations, or at least were at one time in the 70s and beyond. And it's not been that way for a very long time. So look, the Raiders did not get to this position because of one mistake. They got there because of years of bad decisions, draft failures, bad hires, bad fire, all the things that you could do wrong, the Raiders have done wrong. But they now, I think, have a blueprint. They have a quarterback that they can get with a number one pick in the draft. They have a coach who has a defined offensive identity. They have some financial flexibility. They have draft capital. They've got some young talent already. And I would think that they also have an owner who knows better than to get involved in any way. Sometimes bad owners, they want to put their fingers in it and think that they know better. I don't think that Mark Davis is that kind of guy, and I would find it hard to... If he's doing that with Tom Brady, I would find that very hard to believe. So the Raiders, they have been wandering the desert since arriving in the desert, but now I think for the first time in forever, they actually might have a plan. They might actually have a way of figuring out where they are on the map and being able to get back to respectability. It's been a long time since the Raiders have been there, and if they're ever going to do it, the 2026 offseason has to be the start of it. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've watched this long, if you've listened this long, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, whatever platform you're taking the podcast in on. It really does help us out. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.